Welcome everybody. My name is Peter Bates. One of my hats I wear, I am chair of the East Cambridgeshire Climate Action Network. But today, this is an open eco homes event organised by Cambridge Carbon Footprint, and I'm delighted to say that we actually have Kershaw from Oakington, and he's going to talk about his cherished 1960s hat. Uh, if I start that again, I'll say his cherished 1960s house. And he's going to talk about this mysterious thing called vehicle to grid or V2G, something that's very close to my heart and actually my home as well. So I think without further ado, I need to do a few housekeeping things to begin with before we start. So can I ask you all to mute, which it looks as if it's everybody has done so right at the moment, which is great. Please stay mute until a point where we call you to ask any questions which may appear. Also, can you write any questions or comments in the chat there? But when you're writing a question, could you perhaps put a Q before the question so it's quite clear what's a question and what's actually a comment? And then at various points during the presentation, we'll stop and try and answer or get Paul to try and answer some of those questions on there. The slides, the chat, and the video will be available and emailed to you in the next day or two. So no problems about that. You will get a second opportunity to have a look at there. Okay, so while we're recording this, apparently your names won't be displayed, but if you don't want to appear on the recording, please do turn off your video and then we won't be able to see you. But in fact, nobody else will be able to see you when it's actually appears on YouTube. Okay, so I'm now going to introduce our speaker, who is, as I was saying earlier, is Paul Kershaw. And he is going to talk about his cherished 1960s family home with V2G. And as I was saying earlier, V2G is vehicle to grid. So, Paul, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. Yes, so this is actually my second video that I've done, second online tour for Open Eco Homes. The first video a couple of years ago, when I was just starting off with the actual physical retrofit, does go into a bit more detail about the property itself. This talk, I'm going to go into the subject matter of this year's Open Eco Homes, and that's about energy efficiency, getting off the gas and becoming energy efficient. So the first section, I'll be talking about getting off gas and going electric. Then we'll have a break for some questions before heading into section 2. So we all have this, well, a lot of people have this desire of stopping burning the methane, getting off the gas, and being in that position of being able to throw their disgusting gas meter out of their home and relying on more eco-friendly forms of energy supply. Now, when I was thinking about getting off the gas, I didn't have any clue about it really, and I was thinking, well, what do I need to do? And I thought, well, I won't go to my supplier. I'll find out who the network supplier is. So I got in touch with the network supplier for my region, and they quite happily told me that to disconnect myself from the grid, it would cost me approximately, their rough quote is £2,500. They'll come along and dig up the road and take you off. And hopefully, well, I imagine a few of you will be sitting there with your jaws dropped at the figure of £2,500. Basically, that's a step that you don't have to take. They don't tell you that, but what you actually need to do is not to contact your network supplier, but to get in touch with your your energy supplier whoever that may be, the utility company, and get them to come along and just remove your meter and cap the supply pipe. And that they should do probably free of charge, avoiding that £2,500 charge. And when you come off the grid, it's then down to the network operator to come along within a couple of years and assess whether they want to take the action of removing you from the grid permanently by digging up the road, and then that cost would be borne by them. The eagle-eyed among you might spot that there is actually brickwork behind my gas pipe there, and that's because as our property was built before the 1980s, there was the option of installing the gas meter inside the building, and it was installed at the back of our garage. And our garage was at that time just a single garage, but with the meter box at the back. Hopefully you can see my cursor jiggling around on the screen. But in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, we created an extension to the front of the property, creating a double length garage. So our meter box was now at the back of the garage, more towards the back of the house than the front. So this put us in the position where we're wanting to make changes to the house and make the garage area habitable, which means digging up the floor to put down insulation. And you don't want to be doing that with a live gas main underneath your feet. So what we needed to do was to arrange to have the meter box moved from the back of the garage to the front of the property. Now, this is where you do need to get in touch with the network operator if you're in this situation. Not all houses before 1980 had the meter box inside the house. Hopefully you'll have one that's outside, but if it's inside, you may need to take this step. And the utility company, no, sorry, not the utility company, the network operator for the gas, they quoted us an average price of £100 per meter that you are going to be moving the meter box. Now, even though this was along the line of the supply pipe as it comes in, that doesn't matter. It's still just a basic charge of £100 per meter, which you need to pay in advance, and they might give you a refund depending on the circumstances of the job. So we had to dig a trench across the front of the garage, approximately across this area where I'm wiggling the cursor, to try and locate the incoming pipes for the gas. And the big pipe that you can see there is that's the water for the water pipe for the soakaway. Hidden underneath that water pipe is the gas pipe, and just along from the gas pipe, which is underneath in the yellow lines, the soakaway in the blue lines, and the main electricity supply in black, which you can't really see very well. So we needed to disconnect the soakaway to allow access to the gas pipe so that the network operator could then come and install a newfangled gas box that the gas supply pipe would then be ended in and capped in. They were actually very good in that they accepted that we were going to be having external wall insulation installed to the property. So they were kind enough to allow us to fit some wooden blocks there to push the meter box out from the wall to allow for the insulation to go behind, which was quite surprising that they allowed that. But yes, that cost us about £700-800 in total for just getting the gas supply moved. but it's certainly less than the £2,500 that the uh, um, network operator were saying it would cost initially. So you've come off the gas and you want to go electric. I'm terribly sorry about this cough. I'm coming down with a cold. It just happened today. Hopefully I can shake it off overnight, but it seems I'm going to be coughing for a little bit. So when you go electric, you're going to be making a lot of demands now on the electricity supply for your house. Most notably, your heating and hot water will most probably need it to be covered by your electricity supply. Your oven and hob, if you were previously on gas, they'll also need to be electrified. You might have a home battery, you might have an EV charger installed, you might have a kettle or an iron. You've probably got a kettle. These are high demands on electricity because they're producing heat, and you might have a workshop in your house or other high demands on electricity, and, and all these add together and can come to quite a figure. On the export side, you might have or be looking to install solar, you might have a wind turbine, you might have a home battery, you might have vehicle to grid, all are things which can export all at the same time, which then puts a load on your export. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. So when you're going electric, what you do need to do is get in touch with your network operator to find out what any export or import limits might be on your property. Quite often when you have solar installed, they will restrict the export of that to 3.6 kilowatts so it doesn't overload the local grid system. And again, with the import, um, it may be all of these things that you're trying to introduce will be too much for the grid to operate. It looks like I'm being brought a cough sweet. Thank you. Hopefully this will help. Thanks, man. So most houses in the UK operate from what's called a single phase electricity supply. And there is the option to upgrade to a three-phase supply, which means that you can import and export at much higher limits, which will allow then for your heating and hot water. You might have a heat pump that's 5 kilowatts or upwards, although the demand that the heat pump makes, say you get a 9 kilowatt heat pump as advertised, that will generally make a 3 kilowatt draw on your electricity supply. But the electricity provider, the network operator, will generally count all these things all as one item. And again, with the export, they won't count them for operating at separate times. It's the total that you have installed, which they may calculate. So you might need to go onto triple phase, and this is where not paying the gas company £2,500 can come in very useful, because updating to a three-phase supply can cost you from £3,000 upwards, and the network operator that does that, they will quite possibly have to dig up the path or maybe the road, and that can include a 90-day notice period for closure of a road. So that's another thing to bear in mind, is that there may be quite a delay whilst that is put into place. So that's some of the kind of main points of getting off gas and going electric. So I was going to take a break here to see if anybody had any questions they wanted to ask about that process.
I'm
So,
not seeing any questions at the moment, Paul, but maybe just to kind of give you a few minutes break while you recover from your cough. Um, Maybe I can just explain if anybody has any questions, do put them into the chat, and then we can get them answered straight away. But while Paul is just having a few minutes break, it's not always as bad in terms of having to pay out a lot for having your gas removed. I went through the same experience 2.5 years ago, and basically it cost me nothing. But I was fortunate. I already had a box, one of these white kind of asbestos-looking boxes, and it was already outside the front of the house. So in fact, all that had to happen was that you could arrange for the utility company. In my case, it was Octopus Energy, to actually arrange to get somebody along. It's usually a subcontractor, and they basically kind of what they call capped the gas off. But they left the gas meter there, and then at some later stage, the gas meter was taken out, and then when the gas meter was taken out, they decided to leave a bit of quite a long pipe sticking up. And at the point when I was wanting to put a new fence in at the front garden, what they actually did, I rang up and said, "Look, is this going to be okay? I don't know where your pipes are for the gas. Come and tell me." And in fact, a guy came out and checked where the pipes were, and basically I kind of twisted his arm almost, well, not exactly, and managed to get his manager to say, "Well, okay, we're going to take this little piece of pipe that was sticking up out the way. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for me to put my fence in." So it's the company that actually removes all this is the distribution company for gas, which actually is Cadent, covering I think it's most of it, East Anglia and the southeast in that case. So it's not always that you have to actually kind of pay to have your gas meter removed in that way. Shall I? I'm not seeing any more questions appearing. So are you
Yes.
okay, Paul?
So,
To continue?
I've got a question, Peter. Perhaps I can pop in.
Okay, Tom. Yes.
So, Paul, what were the main advantages to you, conveniences or whatever, of being all electric?
it was mostly about being energy efficient, no longer burning methane, with all the issues that surround that. It was the kind of the feel-good factor of being that much more energy efficient and modernizing, taking the steps that everybody should do, when they're in a position to do it. So it was uh, not only for me, but also for my mum, that she recognised the benefits of coming off gas. So that was the main drive behind it,
Good.
is that the with changing over from gas, you just get a much more energy efficient supply of heating and hot water, and everything's that just much more rosy.
I think
Thanks.
it also would depend upon how old your gas boiler is. I mean, in my case, it was at least 30 years old. It was the same when I've been in my house for 27 years, so I assumed it was 30 years old. So at that point, it may well be very appropriate. If you've still got a gas boiler in and it's only 4 or 5 years old, well, maybe you've got to wait a few more years before you actually decide to remove that, because
Or
you
if
would
you're
not have got a
taking,
good return on investment.
if you know that you're taking the steps that we were going to be remodeling the house internally, although our gas boiler was still in very good condition, knowing that we were going to be making these changes to the house, it seemed the optimum time for making the change and coming off the gas, rather than not doing it, and then a few years after having done the whole retrofit, then having to pull the house apart again in order to install such thing as a heat pump. So getting it all done in one fell swoop was, that much more comfortable for us. So our gas boiler didn't need to be removed. It wasn't anywhere near the end of its life, but the benefits of removing it uh, at that point outweighed the negatives. So
Okay.
we
There is a question from Margaret, although I don't know what, I'm not quite sure kind of what you mean by STN, Margaret. So maybe you can put that into the chat. And there is, there's a question about what was the standing charge per month and how long did it take for it to be cancelled?
Well, I can quickly answer about the standing charge in that it's supposed to end as soon as the meter gets disconnected. In my case, it took a couple of the months for the uh, utility supplier, having removed the meter, to then recognise that they had, in fact, removed it and stopped billing us, and then refund the standing charges that we'd paid. So one hand not talking to the other at the utility supplier, but we got the refund on the standing charge that they continued to charge us. So the question from Margaret, I haven't looked in chat.
So
Yep.
that's what she was asking
Ah, right.
for, the one about the standing charge.
Yeah, so that just comes down to the efficiency of the utility provider that you're with, as to how soon within their computer system they can log what's happened. But it should stop as soon as that gas meter is removed.
Oh, you okay to carry on, Paul?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
This throat lozenge, cough lozenge has certainly helped a little bit. Hopefully I can make it through the next bit. So the next part of the talk is more about the energy efficiency and vehicle to grid side of what I've been doing at my home. The project aims of the retrofit were to achieve considered quality of living design. I'll explain that in a moment. Using eco-friendly products where we could, and aiming towards energy efficiency. In my first video for Open Eco Homes, I mentioned a few more things about that, but I can go into a little bit of detail in a moment. But I'll talk about the property. It's a middle of three terraced house. It was built in 1968. They were pretty much flat fronted, but all of the properties have now got extensions out at the front. The back of the house is practically completely flat, and it was constructed with standard brick and block with a 50mm cavity wall, which we did have blown fibre insulation put in a decade or so ago. So that was the status of the house prior to the retrofit kind of starting in full. So when you're thinking of doing a retrofit, there are a number of tools available to you. The biggest tool that I used, I think, was Open Eco Homes, as I learnt so much through visiting other houses, attending the talks that they gave. That really did put me in the strongest position to start my endeavour. And that's the main reason why I'm now here today, trying to pass the baton on and help others. But physical tools that you've got, an EPC certificate is not really one of them. They're not especially well produced, but they can give you a guideline. The most easiest thing they can do is tell you whether you're eligible for any grants that may be available for free insulation or likewise. One of the really efficient things you can do is to do an air tightness test to find out how drafty your house is, because that can really give you a very good idea of what you're up against when you start the retrofit. And you can use incense sticks generally just to check for drafts around the house. But it's also your experience of living in the property itself. You know which the rooms are that heat up, you know the ones which are coldest. And that knowledge and experience of living in the property can really help. Another great option is to borrow a thermal camera from Open Eco Homes. As that can really help to paint a picture of where the heat is escaping from your property. Our house, as it was prior to the retrofit, we had kitchen, living room, study, and single garage, as was built originally in '68. And there was a passageway that goes through from the front to the rear of the property, and that was our only access to the back garden. As I mentioned, in the late 70s, early 80s, a dining room extension was added to the front of the property, also doubling the length of the garage and allowing us to put in a downstairs toilet as well. Upstairs, the property was 2 double bedrooms and 2 single bedrooms. And for some strange reason, I don't know if you can see behind pictures of people on the screen, but we had a strange setup of a shower room and a bathroom, and the bathroom had a built-in airing cupboard space for a water cylinder, and it had a separate toilet at the top of the stairs. So what we wanted to achieve from our retrofit is just to make it a much easier house to live in. So prior to the retrofit, pretty much all of the rooms were dead ends, apart from the kitchen, which was a passageway through. So anybody working in the kitchen was constantly disrupted by people trying to get through. So the aim was to make it a much more of a kind of a flow throughout the house. We moved the front door with its very narrow entranceway to the front of the property. We shortened the garage so it's now more of a bike store. This allowed us to create a living area for myself, and at the garden end of this long room is now available. It's able to be used as a bedroom. Should anybody need to kind of live downstairs. And at the entrance just inside, we've also managed to create a wet room in a 1 by 3 meter room. It's quite an achievement. It's not a fully accessible wet room, but it is possible to get in there with a wheelchair. It's rather a feat of engineering. So we had to keep the hall with the passageway through from the front to the rear. As I mentioned, that's our only access to the garden. And the kitchen, we extended. It's only a 2 by 3 meter extension, quite small. And that allowed the kitchen to not be a walk-through area. And we took down loads of walls and made some windows bigger just to create a more light and airy area for us. On the first floor, as I mentioned previously, 2 double bedrooms, 2 single bedrooms, and we were aiming to knock the 2 single bedrooms into 1 double bedroom and to knock through from the shower and the airing cupboard to create a larger bathroom. Having these plans in place meant that when we came to fitting an air source heat pump, for which you need a location outside of your property for the main pump, you also need to have room inside for the water cylinder that you will now need, and for the various gubbins of the heat pump. And I chose a Mixergy cylinder for our water cylinder. The benefit of this is that the Mixergy that can use either electricity or mains electricity, mains gas, solar electricity or heat pump in order to generate hot water, because we knew that during the retrofit there would be walls coming down, the heat pump would need to be turned off. So even though we wouldn't be able to have heating, we could still divert the power supply that the Mixergy was using, so we could have hot water whilst we were living in the property, whilst this retrofit was going on. And having done all of the planning stages, knowing that we wanted to keep the bathroom larger, I opted to put the water cylinder and the internal gubbins into the wardrobe in my bedroom, because I knew that when we combined these two small bedrooms into the one larger bedroom, I'll be able to also steal a bit of that room and create a new wardrobe along the side of the wall. So that allowed a lot more space for the bathroom in the new retrofitted house. The Mixergy hot cylinder, as I mentioned, I probably spoke about that at the wrong time. There's link to that. They do a number of different water cylinders, one which even has its own heat pump built into the cylinder itself. They're quite technological whizzes, Mixergy, and if you're running it off the electricity, it can also be plugged into the half-hourly rates and determine when is the best time to heat water at which rates, and it works out how much you tend to use on a regular basis, so it will only heat as much water as you tend to need when it's being heated by electricity. So it's quite a technological marvel. So the considered quality of living design that I mentioned earlier, it's just kind of a term I came up with. Other terms might be universal living, but it's just about making life easier for us in the house. I'd attended a dementia awareness course and learned some great tips from them, but generally about making the house more accessible, so we have same level access at the front door with wider doorways, making the house easier to clean, including putting in a water softener so we don't have all the scale issues. In the bathrooms, we've put in assisted bathing facilities by design, so there are grab rails which are incorporated into the shower riser rail and a towel rail, so we don't end up with those great big white plastic grab rails that get put in at a later date and are quite an eyesore. We went for the broken planned living, and generally it's just about creating a more comfortable environment for us as well. The air source heat pump provides 24-hour round-the-clock heating, so it's a much more comfortable heating environment that you're in. And as we both spend our days at home, it is a lot more comfortable that with a gas heater, you are probably going to be comfortable twice a day, in the morning and in the evening, when people tend to put on their gas boilers. Whereas the air source heat pump, its efficiency comes from leaving it on all the whole time at a low output, but it just makes for a much more comfortable living environment. Some of the eco-friendly products we incorporated into the build were bamboo flooring. Oh no, that's not bamboo flooring. I've mislabeled that. That's actually cork flooring. Cork flooring came about in the 70s. You used to have these lovely bright orange tiles, but now there's a whole range of different colours you can get, and for different areas of the house. These are actually fitted in the kitchen and they are suitable for that. We used clay paint because that doesn't emit any VOCs. You can paint a bedroom and sleep in it that same night. It doesn't smell. It's just, again, creates a bit nicer environment. In the bathroom upstairs, we used marmoleum, which is the eco-friendly version of linoleum. And in the wet rooms, we've made an attempt at reducing our water use by fitting a reduced flow shower head and reduced flow tap nozzles as well. having made a bit of an error with installing some spray foam into our roof, I then, which is very, very carbon intensive and can lead to issues, I'd spend a bit more time looking into the external wall insulation that we were going to use and opted for wood fibre insulation to be installed at the front of the property, and that would be clad with Scottish larch and cork at the rear of the property. And both of these products, we were aiming for breathability as opposed to going for airtightness. And it allows for that. And it's also, pardon me. So yeah, sorry, I was saying we were going for breathability for the walls of the house. But with breathability, I also wanted to make sure that we did have adequate ventilation, as that's one of the things that our house previously didn't have. And for that, we went for Aereco demand control ventilation. Now, a mechanical ventilation with heat recovery is the gold standard for putting into a retrofit or a new build. And demand control ventilation is that, but without the heat recovery. So you do lose some heat through this system. It's it's permanently on, but the control part is that there are, if we get to it, sensor activated extracts located in the house that come on when there is their presence noted, or if the humidity levels rise. And the extract unit, it's a centralized single unit which we fitted in the bathroom. And fortunately, all of our wet rooms are in that one corner of the house. We've got the shower room and toilet upstairs, and beneath those downstairs are the kitchen and the wet room. So the amount of duct work that we needed was only a couple of meters worth, whereas for the mechanical ventilation with heat recovery, we'd need to install a lot more duct work. The purchase price of the equipment would be a lot higher, and as would the installation cost and the running costs. So hopefully this will save us a little bit of money and will do an efficient job. Unfortunately, we still haven't got it turned on as yet. We're looking forward to that. The intake of air is through vents in the bedroom. We've got humidity activated vents which are placed over the trickle vents, which allow the fresh air to come in. And downstairs there are wall vents installed for the same purpose. So now we're getting on to the exciting bit, as far as I'm concerned, which is vehicle to grid house everything. You've probably heard of a few different acronyms: V2G, V2H, V2X. The way that I kind of look at them is determined by who actually pays for the equipment. For vehicle to grid, I see that as being supplied by the utility company, and as such, they're supplying the equipment. They will have more control over the import and export times that are used, and they will have control over what tariff you may have access to. For vehicle to house, I see that as where the homeowner has purchased the equipment, and they will therefore have more control over the import and export, and they can choose whichever tariff that they want to. Vehicle to load, I think that's when it's just a fancy cigar lighter socket in the car, like you might have a 3-pin socket down by the back seat, or something you can plug into the charger socket, which allows you to plug in a 3-pin. Doesn't allow for very much export at all, so it's not very functional. Vehicle to building, that's where you might use, say you go along to a car park at a hospital and you might pay for your parking. But instead of paying for the parking, you plug your car in, and the hospital can then import or export from your car battery. Again, that might work for outside cinemas. You go along and plug in. Instead of paying to watch the film, you plug your car in, and that helps to power it all. So those come into the load and building, come into the everything kind of bracket. Now, most of the concepts I'm going to go through, you can replicate them by buying home batteries. The main advantage of the vehicle battery is that they are a lot cheaper. My current EV has got a 62 kilowatt battery installed, and if you're looking at purchasing a home battery, which was up to about 60 kilowatt, you'd be looking at paying twice the amount as you would for a new car, and if it was a second-hand car, it would be a lot more. So my story with Vehicle to Grid started in November 2016 when I moved back to Oakington, and I became an early EV adopter because I only needed to do very short journeys, and the current diesel car I was driving, it's not suited to doing short journeys at slow speeds. So an electric vehicle that could only do 60 miles was perfectly suited to me. I heard about a vehicle to grid trial through social media, open to members of the public to apply for. So I applied to join that trial in 2018, and I knew that this required a Nissan Leaf car. Nissan is a Japanese make, and as such, it uses the Japanese standard of charger socket called CHAdeMO, and most electric vehicle companies will use a socket standard called CCS, but it's only the Japanese CHAdeMO that allows for bidirectional charging. That's mostly still the case. There are a few electric vehicle companies now that are incorporating bidirectional charging into their CCS cars, but it's still not off the ground as yet. For that first V2G trial, the charger was installed in August 2019, and that trial was run by a combination of OVO Energy, who are the utility supplier, and Indra, who are the manufacturer of the bidirectional charger. And there were only about 320 trialists involved in that trial, and it was set to run for 2 years. As I was one of the first people to have a charger installed, I was actually on that trial for 3 years in total, because they couldn't install all of the chargers at once, so it took them about a year to install those. So the trial ran for 3 years, and OVO Energy continued to offer the beneficial rates that was made available to the trialists whilst they were on the trial. But in August 2022, I joined the vehicle to home trial, which was offered by Indra, the manufacturer. And for that trial, we went on to basically you could choose whichever tariff from whichever supplier that you wanted to. So it was very much more of a kind of a real world trial, which is why I wanted to join that. The vehicle to grid, even though these were just very basic trials, you get the control over the battery that you need in order to keep on functioning as normal. You can set how much you want the car to import or export. So you can set it so it won't export more than, for me, it was 25%. That would allow me enough mileage to get wherever I wanted to go. By this time, I was onto the Nissan Leaf, and that had a range of 180 miles, no, 150, let's say. So I knew that a 25% charge, that allows me to get anywhere. And the maximum charge is set to 90 or 95% because that keeps the battery healthier if you're not charging it all the way up to full. And you could set a departure time into your charging schedule so it would know that you want your car to be ready to depart by 7 o'clock or whatever time the following day, and you had control of all of this through an app on the phone. The idea with the vehicle to grid is that it would allow the national grid to balance its needs by using the batteries of the vehicles involved in the trial. And generally, this would mean that you import in these blue spikes, you import overnight when the electricity demand is lower, and then you'll export later on in the day when there is the peak demand. This was quite a peculiar day. It imported overnight for 4 hours, and sorry, no, that yeah, for 4 hours, and then it started exporting quite early in the morning that day. And then it seems that they may have brought the power generation online again a bit too abruptly, because it then started requesting that we accept some of the excess load that they were generating by that time. And there's a little bit of export higher demand around lunchtime, and then in the evening there was demand for export. So it's the utility company that controls when your car is going to be importing or exporting as per the demands of the national grid. And for the export, they would give you a certain a kilowatt rate for any units exported. And as this was a trial, it was quite a beneficial rate. But going on to the Indra trial, that was then on any publicly available tariff. So it was very much more a kind of a real world scenario that we were operating in. And for this graph of vehicle to home, this shows, so there's a state of charge of the battery in the car is represented by the yellow line. And there are times when I leave the home and go out, so the battery drops down to 0, come back and plug back in. The power that that is being exported from the car is, no, sorry, that's generally the power levels. The orange line that runs across is measuring how much the house is demanding. You can see that there's very much no demand from the orange line because it's all being matched here in the blue by the car battery. When I take the car away from the home, that's when it does starting to draw energy from the grid. I then come back in the morning, plug the car back in, and the line does go up, and that's from the solar that is being generated by my house getting stored in the battery. And then at midday on that day, I know that there was actually Octopus Energy were offering free energy because there was an excess of available electricity on the grid. So everybody's invited to use extra electricity for 0 cost. And then I pop out in the afternoon again. And then down here you can see the light blue discharge time period in the evening for the peak period of 4 till 7 o'clock, where I'm then exporting to the grid, and the car battery status is decreasing. Then stop exporting at the end of the peak time, and you can see that the car battery is then covering the needs of the house for the remainder of the evening. So it's just all about mainly covering the demands of your house by using solar electricity that you're generating. If there are periods in the day when there is excess demand or there are requests from the grid that you either import or export, you then can then take advantage of those sessions. Then in August of this year, I've joined my third trial. This time it's being operated by Indra and EDF, and they approached the trialists that had previously been on the Project Sirius with OVO Energy and Indra, and then the Indra trial itself, because we already had the charger units installed. They approached us to join their trial so that they could get some data on vehicle to grid. But for this trial, they ended up they only wanted 20 trialists. Basically, they weren't getting that much funding from the government as the original project was, so it ended up a much smaller trial. And on this trial, I'm now on the extremely variable tariff where you're being charged different rates every 30-minute period throughout the day. So that is a very brief kind of vehicle to grid explanation, and that does bring to end my talk. So I'll give you the opportunity if you wish to answer
You've,
ask any
you've got
questions.
some more questions, yes. So, Mark, and so Nicola has written a couple of questions in chat. You're welcome to put yours in too. But Nicola, would you like to unmute and ask yours?
Hello, hi. Yes, got a very similar, it's much smaller, but a similar 1960s house to you, Paul. I've just been researching various things recently. I guess the first question was to the blown cavity insulation. Have you had any issues with that? Because I've heard that sometimes it can slump or damp can sort of be caused by the rainwater bridging the cavity by the insulation. So I wondered how that's going after 10 years.
Yeah, before we did any work, one of the other things that we did was we uh, got somebody in with a borescope and they drilled a hole in the wall in various places, stuck this scope through with a camera on the end so that they could check how the insulation was standing up to life. We're very fortunate. We found out that the insulation was really doing quite well, and when we pulled for upstairs, when we combined the two smaller bedrooms together, we replaced two single. Each of those bedrooms had a window, so we created a one larger window, and so that required bringing some of the walls down, and we saw that the insulation had, was still there and still in good condition. So we're quite fortunate in that. It does come down to a number of factors in, how good the original installers, how good a job they did, the location of your house and the orientation of the walls, if any are particularly prone to, being rained on, how your guttering has been behaving. If you've had guttering that's been leaking onto the brickwork for years, then there's a pretty good chance that some of that water may have soaked through the very porous bricks and got into the insulation. So it's something that when you're doing a retrofit, getting that in, that pile of information you can before actually starting anything is, that's one of the things that it can be useful to look at, is taking a look at the state of your insulation there in your cavity walls, up in the loft, and also the heat loss camera that you can use uh, as kind of a first step, and you can then get a picture of the wall, and you do need to have quite a difference in temperature between outside and inside, but it can tell you straight away if there are any glaring areas where, it's quite obvious that that insulation has failed.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. And my second question was about the wood fibre insulation, which I'm looking to use for my house. And I guess I've I was just wondering, did you have to line it with like a fire protection board, like a calcium silicate board or something externally for fire reasons? Or yeah, so I know wood fibre it chars, so that's great. But I was wondering, like, could you get that through building control?
Yeah, again, that comes down to your building. We were a terraced building, so the fire regulations are that for a certain distance where between the party walls, we do have to have um, fire barriers, which give a minimum amount of burn time.
Mm.
So we did have to do that on where close to the party walls. For the other areas of the wall, because again it's only a two-story property that we're in, there isn't the regulations that you need to fireproof that. So you can just using the wood fiber boards and then have air and water barriers
Mhm.
included in the construction of that, and then you'll need to clad over the top uh, of the wood fiber and its various protective layers. But the fireproof layer, that if you're in a detached house, it's quite possible you don't have to install the fireproof layer. But if you're in a terrace property where you come up against the party wall, you do then have to add that fireproof layer.
Okay, well, it then leaves me to actually say thank you, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Paul, for your presentation. Thank you, Tom, for fielding the questions that came out. And thank you, everybody else. Thank you.